So after 1941 with Citizen Kane, RKO had a big hit, and what they did was completely shift everything they did. Instead of going with genius, they wanted to do showy. They wanted to do what Universal was doing, making money with horror movies. So after 1941, they completely disbanded any kind of showy. They got rid of the genius kind of artwork, and they went through to the showy kind of artwork. They want to do horror movies. They want to do quick and fast, and with the bestseller of that year of 1942 is Cat People.
Yeah.
This was their big hit.
And I think it's a fantastic thing that the Cat People movie from '42, the Curse of the Cat People sequel, and the remake of Cat People are all drastically different movies.
There's a movie after it's called The Leopard Man.
Yeah. I mean,
they're all different, yeah.
I'm a big fan of cats in movies, and I'm a big fan of abandoning all your projects and focusing on horror. So, hey, it's Scary Movie Saturday, so let's do it, Nick.
Yeah.
We're talking about Cat People, baby.
I got my copy.
Bring your copy. We got 2 copies of Cat People. Join us for it. Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continued support the show. You can follow our show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals. Today we're going to talk about RKO's big hit of 1942, Cat People.
Yeah. So when Oliver Reed meets the Serbian-born Irena, they fall in love and quickly marry. But Irena refuses to consummate the marriage as she believes she's the victim of an ancient curse that would transform her into a bloodthirsty panther if she makes love. When Oliver sends Irena to treatment, he finds his emotions running to a work colleague, something sure to infuriate Irena.
World War II, a lot of the writer staff for movie productions went to the war effort. And so a lot of them were doing accounts and stuff, office jobs during World War II, and abandoned their positions and movie productions. So movie productions had to look for people to make stories fast and cheap. And when you do, you find the pulp writers.
Oh, yeah.
And they found a pulp writer with Val Lewton. Val Lewton was still kind of working around the circuits of films, but he also was an author, poet. He did like script writing, and he's a script doctor as well. But he was a production chair of getting stories out quick and fast. RKO at the time disabandoned what they did with Citizen Kane. No big productions. You had to keep your budget under $150,000, and movies had to be under 75 minutes. And with all that restrictions, you can see the kind of quick and fast this movie goes.
Oh, yeah.
And how very pulpy it is.
I
Val Lewton
I love cruising speed on movies. I think it's fantastic. And I'm totally fine with a 73-minute little horror piece. There was even a thing I was watching, an interview with a guy who had watched like 1,000 movies while in quarantine, and he said like it was great on the days I like hit my Universal horror. I just 7 or 8 movies in one day, and it's true. Right. This is kind of on that level as well. Yeah, so March of 1942, Val Lewton had been working for David O. Selznick, and disembarked from that venture, didn't want to have anything to do with that anymore.
Oh, yeah, you got
and he
too
was given the
flashy
opportunity to work for RKO as their like B-movie side horror person, like their person to like help shepherd these projects in. So this is like the first of the Val Lewton horror films.
Yep.
We even get what is referred to as the Lewton bus. Is something I discovered while watching this movie.
It's called the Lewton bus. It's kind of the initial start of what we regard now as jump scares.
Yeah, it was kind of there, and it was always kind of associated with the jump scare that was ultimately meaningless. You know, the building tension to something that was going to be explosive and very scary, but ultimately a cat
it's the launch
crying
pad
outside.
Yeah, the Lewton bus is kind of a launch pad for a jump scare.
And if you've ever seen the Community episode where they're at the Halloween party, there's a great moment where they're getting these Lewton bus moments of like a cat keeps jumping in front of them throughout the entire 25 minutes, and someone literally yells, "Is someone throwing the cats?" And it's a great homage to the Lewton bus and Cat People. We have director Jacques Tourneur, who
yes.
I don't know anything else about his direction. I know he did Out of the Past.
From France, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. Him and cinematographer Nicholas Muscaraka.
Okay. Yeah.
Would team up again to do one of my favorite noirs. It's the top 5 for me, Out of the Past.
Yeah.
And this is a very horror film noir.
Yeah, it's kind of got the best of both of our loves, I guess.
Yeah.
It's got your film noir like style to it. It doesn't have as many of what we consider to be the tropes of it, but it also doesn't have that many
Very
of what we
much
consider to be
shadow
horror
plays.
tropes. You know, it's kind of a little bit of. We even discussed whether or not we put this on Scary Movie Saturdays because you could view it as a not horror movie, but I think anyone who might turn into an animal is a little bit terrifying to me.
But the setting of her walking down the street of And it's all,
yeah.
That's very noir, but it's also very like a
very horror
movie.
too. Yeah,
very horror movie.
This is a very unusual marriage of two things that don't often get put together, but they have so many of the same kind of elements of tension. And again, like the Luton bus, if you will, is something that also would happen in noir films, and it's something that also happens in horror films. They kind of just like separated on how they dealt with the supposed jump scare.
I've watched this many times, but I wanted to. Why is this so effective? Because I know it's coming, and it's still kind of like
Yeah.
But the sound just goes ahead of the bus first. So if you watch it closely, the sound actually comes first before you see the bus first. So it's like and then the bus is. So that's a great effect to use, especially for this movie as well.
Well, I almost wonder if that was something that was done in 2010's Insidious, the James Wan film, forces its music actually before the jump scare. So it will hit you with that really heavy, like, wire string music right before you even see the monster. And then you're jumping before there's anything to actually jump to. And that's something I criticize about that film, because it went too far into that. But with this film, it hits it just enough where, you start jumping before you actually see what you're supposed to jump.
The other famous scene in this is the pool scene.
Yes.
Because if you didn't know, the character played by what's her name? Arlene. It's Simone.
Oh yeah, so Irina Dubrovna.
Irina,
character.
But she's stalking her rival.
Yes.
At the gym club, and then you never see the Panther. You just hear her, and the very effect of her jumping in the pool, and the sound effects.
Yeah, and RKO really wanted more Panther in the film, so they kept pushing to have the Panther in. So there actually
There's
a couple
a little
of
animation of it.
Well, there's a couple moments where the Panther is actually on set in the darkness, and you can see just a hint of it, because RKO wanted it in the movie, but then they darkened that area so you wouldn't see it. Because, Jacques did not want the Panther to be so prevalent in this narrative. It's got to be about story first, which I agree. And Luton defended the director quite often, where they actually, both of them were pretty much fired and rehired in the first 3 to 4 days of production. Because I think the realization came that, we're in a war right now. We can't find anyone that quick to replace it. We need to get this movie done. It was shot in 18 days. We need to get this in and out and quick. You talk about going from 1942 March, Val Luton leaving David O. Selznick, to March 1942 when this film comes out. It is less than 9 months from the time he left his previous job to the time this film was released. It was a quick turnaround.
And you understand it. This came out December of 42, and it made more money in the theater than The Wolfman did. Coming out just the year before, it made more monies. It was a big success, and I think people during the wartime got what this movie was about.
Yeah.
I liked the dance around the seduction, but it was very pulpy. I know Val Newton worked in that kind of genre. He kind of regarded it, but that's where he functioned. That's where he likes best. There's certain elegance. There's supposed to be, it almost dance around this elegant story.
Oh, yeah.
But then it's it gets too elegant. Let's go back to be a pulpy.
Yeah, it's kind of like a horror noir hybrid that's not afraid to say, we're going to showcase the beauty in all these elements, because film noir is usually kind of a dark and scummy. I mean, there are a lot of scummy characters in noir. Horror definitely has scumminess to it, but this is kind of one where it's we're going to paint a beautiful portrait for you of horrible things that are going to happen, if we don't fix it. The film came out in December. It actually was in theaters so long that people who went to the theater to see the film didn't like it, wrote reviews how they didn't like it. It was in the movie theaters for so long that they actually went back to it often. So there are a couple of cases where a reviewer came out with a bad review, and a few months later a good review, because they went back to revisit the film and found a lot of their negatives turning into positives. It's crazy when a movie is in theaters for that long that you can actually change someone's mind.
Well, let's go back to, because so many people, right, yeah.
Because there's oftentimes movies I'll revisit that I didn't like. Maybe I wasn't in the right headspace. Maybe it's a movie that works better on a second viewing. But usually it's not 2 months later, 3 months later. It's, 5-10 years have passed and I've revisited something, or it ended up being on the show. There's a couple of movies I didn't like that we watched for the show, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, go back. So her apartment, Simone's apartment in this movie, is based in the stairwell, and it's the same stairwell used in the film The Magnificent Ambersons. So that's the same set, and
most of the sets were
most of the
recycled
set
from
was
that
actually
film.
used, yeah. And then you have the zoo scene. I love this. The beginning of the movie, I love that she's right in front of Black Panther and she's sketching.
Yep.
But the funny thing is, it's a warning where she's sketching. She drew this panther, but a big sword's going right through it.
Yeah.
I should tell you, if any woman's drawing that in a zoo, maybe you want to keep your distance.
Yeah, I mean, there's no actual swords on play at that zoo, I would assume. So
No.
she's using some creative license, I think. I like the settings for all that stuff, and I think the zoo setting was a previously used set as well from another film where it was reused in another one. RKO is very clever about like
Recycling
mixing
stuff,
and
yeah.
recycling, which I have no issue with. I think if you can keep reusing a set and I don't recognize
Yeah, 'cause it's a good
immediately,
stairwell.
it's a good idea to do because first of all, it's not wasteful, and second of all, like you're a company, especially RKO, is trying to save a buck. They lost a lot
Well, that
of money.
stairwell
on
is
Citizen
effective
Kane.
for using shadows, like, or someone would like to use shadows, and like, but it's using for shadows for noirs.
Yeah. So it's a clever use of reuse, and again, like using different genres when you move some sets, because then you're even less likely to notice because you're having a different mood when you watch something. I guess RKO's biggest concern with why they wanted like things like the extra Panther, the added horror elements to it, was because they knew that Universal was king right now. And that was
Yeah.
one of the reasons they wanted a shorter runtime, was because they wanted it to play more frequently. And they also wanted it to be able to compete with the big wigs over at Universal, which I think creatively, I love Universal as the Wolfman. So like creatively, I think the Wolfman comes out on top for me.
That's a lot of fog machines, though.
Yeah, but like Cat People, I think hit a little bit harder with people who kept going back to the film because it has a lot of layers to it, and I don't think it's something that you notice on first viewing.
Well, yeah, and if she gets emotionally triggered, she turns into a cat.
Yeah.
Sexually, anger, frustration. She thinks like a rival. She turns a cat, and she knows it. I do like they don't show her transitioning, but all they do is just put sparks in her eyes or something like
Yeah.
that. They light her eyes, and then her face gets dark, and you're like, oh, she's gonna get. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it was. I kept having visions of like if Casablanca was a Cat People movie, because of the way that they light their female faces in both those movies was like, we're gonna really shine on that.
Yeah.
So Casablanca could have been a very different.
And the
film.
restaurant scene when the woman who almost looks like a cat with her little bonnet, and she recognized that maybe she's part of our cult of people that can transition to cat. Hey, sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Simone was cast because Val Lewton actually said that she had a kitten face. And I guess when he said that, I was like, huh. And then I looked at it, I was like, kind of.
Yeah, kind of, right. A little. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that, but I was just I was like, yeah, that's weird.
But it's a quick turnaround because when you make a budget under $150,000 and your movie, just being in theaters, gets back almost $2 million.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna go to Val. You got any more of this?
Yeah. Give me some of that more cheddar, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But I like that, yeah, this film is it's about a lot of things, but it never feels like it's lost in what it's about. Because first time I viewed the film, I viewed it as a simple horror story. Simple enough. You know, it's a little,
It is a
kind of a
simple-
little simple horror story.
It
Second
is.
time I saw the movie, I saw a lot of the views on sexuality, the views on repression, the views on all that kind of stuff from a purely like romantic angle. And the most recent time I watched the film, I saw a lot of elements of mental health issues.
There is that subtitle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course the sequel deals heavily in mental health. Curse of the Cat People deals a lot with mental health in our youth, mental health with like being carried on from our parents to now. So that's something that I saw more often just because I had rewatched Curse of the Cat People fairly recently as well.
Well, there's something I catch after watching this many, many times, and finally, she's Simone's character is the interruption to a love story. She's the interruption.
The tragic interruption.
The tragic interruption. That you take her out, you just have a simple love story. Two people meet at the office and fall in love. But she is the interruption. She's the one that buries the guy. Mm-hmm. And then gets an entanglement of the problem.
And I used to really hate Oliver Reed as a character for this because I didn't really connect with the fact that he's drawn to her and can't control himself because she has that carnality. Again, 1942 carnality, where like you can't stop yourself, you want to have her kind of a
Something
thing.
like a moth to the flame. Kind
Yeah.
of thing.
And the first time I watched the movie and the second time I didn't really play that. I was like, yeah, he's kind of a jerk because he goes and falls in love and marries this woman and then he's like, I want to get my side hustle on. This most recent time was where I really connected with the fact that he can't control himself. That's part of the Cat People persona, is
And
that
she
they draw
can,
the men in. Yeah. There's that level of being out of control with sensuality that I think works pretty well, especially because one of my wife's favorite actors is actor Oliver Reed. So I make the connection
with
between
his
the
big
sensuality
eyelashes?
of him,
Yeah.
and my wife loves Oliver
Batting
Reed.
eyelashes.
So
Yeah.
good connection there.
But there's the effectiveness of not only did the Val bus effect work, but also that the leaves, that you think that behind the leaves, rustling leaves, as is the Panther.
Yeah.
Even though it's two stagehands, probably us two just don't
Yeah.
have this yet.
It's just two guys shaking around in the back.
But it's the effect of snowfall.
Mm-hmm.
It's a winter movie sometimes, and it just looks very dreamy quality because we know snow does not act like that at all. But it affects in the movie that dream kind of sleepy quality to it that I really like.
I think that is taking to the viewer experience and placing us in the shoes of like a Ken Smith's Oliver Reed character, is because every time we have Irina on film, even when she's going through hard times, she's lit in this way that it's impossible not to fall in love with her. As a viewer, like you pine for her. She's beautiful, but she's also tragically like wounded. And there's a way that you see that with the leaves rustling, with the snow on the ground. I think the idea is that we can't control ourselves either. We fall in love with her even in 70 minutes.
There's a certain naiveness to her that is kind of a falsehood.
Yeah.
Because she's awful person.
Yeah.
Even though she doesn't want to admit it to herself.
Yeah.
But yeah, she can do awful things. She kills a bird for God's sakes.
Yeah.
But she has that innocent quality that almost gives you a forgiveness to it.
We get the sense that again, like just like with Reed, we get the sense she can't control it either. There's a lot of control issues being played out as well.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to this movie's about a lot of things, but it never feels like it's forcing you to accept one of them. It has a very like loose theme to it, where you can see a lot of things kind of playing out throughout the movie, but it's never hitting you over the head with them.
And it's not very showy, and it's a showy movie.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a showy story, but not a showy theme. And I think that's something that I've had some real struggles with in recent movies that have come out, was movies where the themes and the subplots and the ideas at play are more important to the filmmaker than the story itself. And I think you can't have a good theme symbolism if you don't have a good story at the beginning, because this has to work as a piece of entertainment first. It just does.
And it does.
And it does.
Yeah. And it's 80 years old. That's why we're talking about it. So,
I can't believe it's 80. Oh my gosh.
It's 80 years old.
But we also have, we have the sequel, and then we have the remake that both came out. They
There's
both take
offshoots
different...
like the Leopard Man. There's some other animal.
But there's also one other thing that's connected to this film. There's another movie that is connected to this movie in a very strange way, and that is The Seventh Victim.
That's another great noir,
which features Tom Conway playing the same role he plays in this film. He plays Dr. Judd. He plays the same role in both those movies. So this is kind of like a spin-off in some ways. So it's got kind of this like, it kind of was doing that Universal Monsters thing where like these characters.
Tom Conway comes back.
Yeah.
Right. And it's got that very horror.
And do you remember the year that one came out?
I had to be like 44.
Yeah, so probably would have been almost about the time that Curse of the Cat People was moving through. But it's interesting to note that this film has so many weird avenues. A character pops up here, there's a sequel right here, there's a remake right here, and they all take drastically different directions.
Yeah, and then Val Lewton will go off to do another, which is a weird title, but it's a B-movie title, but it's a great effective movie again, is I Walked with
the Zombie, yeah.
Yeah, it's very foreboding. You have to watch that movie at midnight. There's no other. Yeah, you have to watch that movie.
Well, thankfully, he was working with RKO, and the movie was short then. We're gonna get stuck at midnight. Yeah. It might as well be a short
another movie. Those two other movies. Hopefully, we get to critique later on with the show.
I would love to critique all of these other movies. I would love to do the sequel, the remake, the spin-off. I'd like to do everything in that world, because there's so much here that I think modern horror fans don't really know about, and it's just not. It's not.
Just Universal takes everything over.
Yeah, during this time period, if it wasn't Universal, it wasn't discussed. And then as soon as Universal kind of left the public image, then it was Hammer, and then it was kind of our 70s like Wicker Man-esque movies and our demon stuff and our Satan stuff, and then we got to slashers after the 80s, and it's like you couldn't have a breakthrough if you weren't part of like what was the popular at the time. And this film, I would consider it to be like of the same kind of ilk as Universal, because it does feel it's a short run time. It's a really simple story. It's really captivating, but it also deals with themes that we don't usually see on the first viewing.
My third favorite part of this movie, before we go, is when she's on the couch and she acts like a cat and she's almost purring with her hands.
Back to me falling in love with her.
She's almost like a cat, just going. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
This dance, yeah.
My one flaw with the movie is that it doesn't have a sweet David Bowie song like the remake does, but that's okay. I can get past it.
And I do like that Val Newton made an emphasis that everybody in this movie has to have some kind of a job. He wanted to show people working, and everybody's job, even including the females. Everybody has a working job. But nowadays, no woman. Nowadays, no woman is going to see a male therapist. Heck no.
Not if there ain't someone else sitting in that room.
No. She'll kill
That's
the
true.
therapist, right?
Yeah, that's true.
She'll kill him.
All right. So what do you think about Cat People from 1942? Let us know down in the comment section below your thoughts on this. I would say underseen, kind of horror, kind of noir, kind of hybrid.
Yeah. Scorsese loves it. He constantly talks about it in his documentary. He actually made a documentary about Val Lewton.
Yeah, so let us know what you thought about the film and what you think about Val Lewton's career in the business, what you think about, which one of these avenues would you like us to see cover first. Would you like us to see it go to The Seventh Victim, Curse of the Cat People, the remake, or do you want us to do Walk with a Zombie? Let us know down in the comments.
There's also a fictitious movie about the making of this movie with Kirk Douglas and Burt Reynolds called The Bad and the Beautiful. And their director is trying to make their first movie, and it's kind of making Cat People.
Oh, it's kind of making it, but not really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want us to see us cover that film? I don't know. Let us know down in the comments, man. And while you're down there, please consider liking and subscribing to the video. There are two things that you can do that don't cost you a dime and help to support the channel, make sure that we can keep doing what we love doing, and
tell your
also make
friends.
sure that you can see our episodes. Yeah, and your friends can as well. And while you're down there as well, Nick pointed out, check out that Patreon. Sacrifice 1 cup of coffee, join the Patreon now, and then you can be part of the team that helps pick the movies we cover. There's a lot of movies, and there's only 2 of us. So thank you guys for joining us. And once again, you can find all my cat thoughts and movie thoughts on GoFilmReviews.com.
I knew you were going to do it. And, that's the reason I picked this movie, because I know just having cat in the title, you're going to like it.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. And you can find my show, The St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right, so we'll just say for now, meow.